Hey, I'm T.A. Charlie, and welcome to The Road to Concord with Professor Joe Bakanovic. Homeroom is on Rumble. You just go to Rumble and search the channels for The Road to Concord. It's one word. When you find it, you go ahead and you click follow. It might mean you got to set up an account, but it's fast, it's easy, it's free. I did it, you can do it. For those technologically challenged members of the class, you can also catch us on Facebook and YouTube. After the show, it's uploaded to Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and BitChute. Just look for The Road to Concord. You can go to the blog page, that's theroadtoconcord.com. That's where you'll find all your show notes, study notes, and handouts for the class. The phone is working. If you don't know how to call in, email us and we'll think about it. Finally, you can email a professor at joe@theroadtoconcord.com. He's a little slow, but he'll eventually get around to emailing you back. This show is currently mainly listener-sponsored. If you are interested in advertising your business on the show, please email us. With that said, we ask for your participation on a value-for-value basis. If you find our show of value to you, then you provide an equivalent portion of your labor and treasure through the donate link on the Road to Concord blog page, the show description on Rumble, and in the comments on the other streams. And thank you to all of you who have and will support this show.
Natasha.
Joe season.
Natasha.
Joe season.
Good morning. Welcome to the Road to Concord. Today is Thursday, May 28th, 2026. I'm your host, Joe Bakanovic, and I'm just continuing the silliness that we were doing before the show started. Sorry, didn't mean to offend anybody. Just one of these days where if I don't find a little levity, I'm not going to want to do the subject of the show today, which is why I am wearing my original Infidel 1805 Tripoli Tour shirt today. Don't you get the reference? From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Charlie 54, where are you? I've been teaching young Natasha about our ancient culture. You know, the TV show Car 54. It's Wabbit season. No, it's not Wabbit season. It's Islam season. So today we're going to learn about the Qur'an. Sort of, kind of. Maybe. I hope. If you will go to theroadtoconcord.com, right up here where it says Islam class outline, you click on that, you'll get to the outline we'll be using. I've updated it today. It's teaching outline 1.4. You could also go down here to the Qur'an, click on that. And this is the Qur'an. That's a PDF of the Qur'an. Here's different translations from Muslims. This is going to be citations about the most commonly accepted Hadith. We'll learn about that later today. Here's some work on whether or not you might want to consider the Qur'an to be, well, I put valid, the validity of the Qur'an, but it's got some significant textual variations. It is not on par with the Bible, etc., etc. This right down here is 180 something pages of quotes from the Qur'an and the Hadith, separated by topic sections. You can peruse those at your leisure. This is what I just told you right here. It's 189 pages of the quotations rather. This is the quotations from fighting. And this is not exclusive. This is not exhaustive. This is just what people picked out. It's not all of them. There's more. There's 189 pages of this. Next week, we're going to go over this page here. It's also on the Qur'an. It's in your PDF. It's the truth about, the Qur'an and your PDF on your homework. It's going to cover some of what we do today again, but it'll give you additional information. The information on this page here, this PDF, is largely compiled by former Muslims. Today, I'm going to be in my teaching outline. It's basically to remind me. It's a reminder cue type of thing, but I filled it out enough that it should be of value to the layman or the layperson who's just stumbling across all of this. All right, so the Quran. What does the word even mean? It's an Arabic term, roughly translated as he reads or he recites, or he read or he recites. It doesn't have an exact English translation. The Quran consists of 114 chapters or books. They're called surahs. They're arranged by longest to the shortest surah. They're not in chronological order. The only exception is the first chapter, first surah, which is essentially a Islamic prayer. There's no fixed numbering for each verse in the surah. So from one translation to another, they might be slightly different. So like in the Bible, you look up John chapter 3, verse 16, it'll say the same in every Bible. Not the case with the Qur'ans. Also, you're going to have this practice of abrogation where one verse replaces another. Because of that, it makes it difficult to know what commands have been superseded because of this ordering structure. You don't know what commands have necessarily been superseded in the Quran. So if you find a command in the very first chapter of, or the second chapter or whatever, chapter on the cow or whatever, if you don't know what order in Muhammad's lifetime that chapter is given, a command there may have been superseded by a command at the end of the Bible, or a command at the end of the Bible might be superseded. I mean, not the Bible, the Quran, excuse me, might be superseded by the first chapter of the Quran. The whole point of this is the reader doesn't know what order the chapters are in, what order they were handed down. Not if you just pick it up and read it. And I'll teach you about abrogation later, but that's basically, you get one command later down the road. Muhammad doesn't like that command, so he changes it. It says Allah changed it for him. I'm sorry. It's when you read it, you see how much, when you read the Hadith, like we'll do next week, and you see how many commandments are later abrogated because Muhammad gets mad at his followers. And that's essentially what it is. He gets angry with the Muslims. He goes and asks Allah, and lo and behold, Allah says, hey, you can't do that no more. Every time. It's always in Muhammad's favor. Always. And the pattern gets easy to see. And because of this, you don't know what is and isn't actually still a standing commandment without the Hadith. And that takes a lot of work to put all that together. Because the order that these things are handed down, it's not in the Quran. You got to know his biography and his life story in order to put it all together. And then you got to work on it. It's a lot of work to put the puzzle pieces together. It's chaos. It's chaos. So the history. Muhammad claims the Quran is before Allah. What? Yeah, it exists before Allah. The Bible is the word of Yahweh. So Yahweh existed before the Bible. Well, the Quran exists before Allah. I have a question for you. If the Quran existed before Allah, how did Allah create everything? This will get more interesting next week when we start looking at some of the contradictions in the Quran. Muhammad also claims the Quran was not created, which from a biblical perspective would mean that the Quran is God Most High, even above Allah. So I don't know what you want to do with that. I don't even know how that makes sense, but okay. All right. What this means is it's not the work of men. Men had no part in this. The Bible is the work of man under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. The Quran supposedly is the work of Allah. And yet somehow or another it gets corrupted repeatedly. And Muhammad has to recite it to put it back into its proper order, in which case it then gets corrupted again. You'll see what I'm talking about. I cannot have respect for this document. I know it's religious. I know it's the foundation of Islam. I know that they're commanded to kill me if I do this. It's in the Quran. It's in the Hadith. But I cannot respect a book that is filled full of contradictions, factual errors, mistakes, that has no foundational lineage. The legend isn't there, and by that I mean can we trace it back to its original sources, and can we put it back together? Do we know whether or not the one you have today is what you had before? That doesn't stand up to academic scrutiny. So anyhow, it's originally supposed to have been handed down physically in its physical form by Allah to mankind. Muhammad will claim that the Quran has been revealed to all prophets before Muhammad. By this, Muhammad means the biblical prophets. So apparently, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, all of those prophets knew the Quran. Well, then why did they give us the Bible? That's never answered. Muhammad claims that Gabriel revealed the Quran to him, to Muhammad. This was to restore the Quran that had been corrupted. Well, there's no existence of a Quran before 100 to 150, 200 years after Muhammad. There's no archaeological, there's no pre-writings from before Muhammad's time that mention a Quran, nothing. So I don't know how and when it got corrupted. And these are questions that the Muslims cannot answer for you. But apparently it got corrupted. Gabriel, is sent by Allah to choose Muhammad to restore the Quran. Gabriel is the jinn in the cave. And this is the name the jinn called himself, if you'll remember. The Quran wasn't put together until 150 to 200 years after Muhammad died. It is said to have been compiled at least twice. It's compiled from various sources, supposedly from existing scraps of the original citations or, readings. These were written on whatever was handy at the time, maybe a scroll, whatever. It includes at least one palm leaf or palm frond that Aisha, his young wife, the 6-year-old when they got married, 9-year-old when he consummated that, when he raped her. She says that one of the surahs, one of the citations or readings that Muhammad gave, was eaten by a goat. So, and it was a palm frond or something. This is in the Hadith. It's also compiled from the memories of second, third, fourth hand or more witnesses. They're called reciters. This means that most of what's in the Quran is hearsay accounts of what Muhammad supposedly said. If we were in a court of law, that's what it would be called. Second, third, fourth hand hearsay. Existing copies of the earliest known Qurans do not match or agree. The oldest copies differ in significant ways. And we're not talking about like in the Bible that has some books excluded and some books included, meaning they contradict each other. They are significantly different. And this is known as textual variation. This is because multiple versions of the Quran existed until the fourth caliph, Uthman, declared his preferred version of the official Quran. He then burned all other variations that he could find. Some some did survive some of the other ones. Uthman, if you'll remember, was Muhammad's son-in-law. He's the fourth. He was a childish, young at the time. And he says that the 3 previous caliphs don't exist. So in a sense, it was a little horn uprooting 3 previous big horns and by the root and saying they don't exist anymore. This is the source of the Sunni Shia rift within Islam. Whether or not you trace the caliph by bloodline back to Muhammad or whether or not others can be the caliph. So they argue over bloodlines. These textual variations are probably the reason why Islamic scholars they're resistant to allow examination of these texts. Christians don't have a problem with you examining the ancient texts of the Bible. It's part of how we do apologetics. If you study you'll learn about these in more detail next week. If you study the older versions of the Quran, you're going to come away with the impression that you have 3, 4, 5 different books. The 7 oldest different surviving copies of the Quran don't agree with each other. So revelations were originally either memorized or written on whatever was available, like I said. This could have been paper, stones, skins, or even palm fronds. They were written in early Arabic, which has no vowels. It's a Semitic language, so it's a lot like Hebrew. And because of this, it's difficult to know the precise meaning of the original text. And that's because root words in these Semitic languages, just like with Hebrew, the root word or the words that derive from it, they all look the same. The only thing that changes is the vowels. And the vowels aren't in the script. So you have to fill in whatever version of that word you believe fits. Next week, you will see several passages translated from Arabic into English by a faithful Muslim and his daughter. They're still Muslims at the time that this was done. It's 10, 15 years ago now, but you'll see. And they show you the different possible variations of what words could be inserted there. And next week, you'll learn a little bit more about just how difficult this is. Some of these written fragments were lost. That's admitted by Islam. They know that a lot of it's been lost. Many of the reciters, the original ones, the ones who actually knew Muhammad, were killed in battle, over 400 of them, before they compiled the Qur'an. So that's why your first-hand witnesses were not part of the people who put the Qur'an together. Islamic authorities admit that there are major portions of the Qur'an have been lost. So I don't know how the Qur'an got restored or preserved. Apparently Allah can't preserve his Qur'an. Authorities also admit that the Qur'an has been corrupted by man. So what does exist has been corrupted. That's admitted to by Islam. Why is it written in Arabic? Well, it's implications for interpretation. The original language has to be understood. You got to translate it. And it's only the word of Allah when you read it in Arabic. Apparently, according to Muhammad, it's got something to do with the sound of the Arabic language. It's poetic or something, and it adds to the understanding of Allah's word. So unless you're reading the Quran in Arabic, it's not the Quran, it's not Allah's word, you're missing something. The Quran is written as one side of a conversation. So it's like you're having a conversation. It's usually the conversation between Muhammad and Allah, but not always. Sometimes it's between Muhammad and other people. And this is why you have to know his history. You got to know his biography to understand who he's talking to here. So it's as if to an audience who is already familiar with the context of the revelation. When I read the Quran, I ran into this quite often. It is a confusing book. If you don't know his biography or the Hadith, and you kind of have to have both the Hadith and the biography, the Quran's not going to make a lot of sense. The Quran is filled with poor grammar and broken structure, language structure. Muhammad says Muslims must fill in for Allah. That's a quote from Muhammad. He must fill in. So in other words, Allah was not capable of giving you an accurate reading of what it is he meant. You got to fill it in. By a secular understanding, that means that you get to make up your own word for Allah. So in a sense that you have command over Allah's word. As a believer in the Bible, I have a hard time with this. It's just, I'm trained to think that, okay, well, this is the individual Muslim is a little God unto himself because he can rewrite the Quran just by how he interprets it or fills it in. It's very progressive. I get to choose and interpret what it means. And that is exactly why there's so much infighting within Islam. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, you have the same problem with the Bible. Not necessarily. You can't allow the Bible to interpret the Bible, and it does. It will. And when you do that, the Bible is not as contradictory as its opponents claim it is. But the Quran never interprets the Quran. Not that I encountered when I was reading it. And also, you have to remember, Muhammad says he's illiterate. So how would he even know if what he's reciting is actual good grammar? I don't know. The Quran is also filled with factual errors, historical errors, scientific errors. The Quran is also self-contradictory. It contradicts itself, not through abrogation. Surahs, in one verse that hasn't been replaced by another. It's an actual real contradiction. We'll see some of those next week. Finally, the Quran cannot be made into a religion all by itself. It cannot stand alone. It requires the Hadith and the Sirah to make it whole. The Sirah is the traditional biography of Muhammad. It's one of the primary books or source material you're going to have to read. The Quran commands Muslims to read the Bible for truth and light. That was never abrogated. Many modern Muslims claim that it was abrogated, but it wasn't. There is no record of abrogation in the Quran. So to this day, they are supposed to read the Bible for truth and light. The Quran claims that Isa, Jesus, their word for Jesus, and Mary are the only sinless humans. Even Christianity doesn't, even the Roman Catholics don't claim that Mary was sinless. Muhammad says he is just a man, so he's not sinless. Muhammad says he can do no miracles or give prophecy. Can't give future readings of what's going to happen. The Quran denies the divinity of the Messiah. Now that right there makes it Antichrist. It also misunderstands the Christian doctrine of the Trinity. The Quran says there is nothing worse than slander. That's the highest sin, but it refers to slander of Muhammad. Sometimes of Islam or Allah, but mostly slander of Muhammad. We'll get into that as well. The Quran says that war is ordained for Muslims. One of Muhammad's last commands was to wage war until there is only Islam left on the earth. Not inner war or inner struggle like some Muslims will claim. No, jihad is war of blood, killing. The Quran says war is deceit. Lying to non-Muslims to advance Islam is permissible. Breaking promises to non-Muslims to advance Islam is permissible. The same principle applies to treaties with non-Muslims. We might actually get to that second PDF before today's over. The Hadith and the Sunnah. Hadith is an Arabic word for report or account of an event or something that was said or done. It's a generalized term. The Hadith is a collection of written records or anecdotes, stories, traditions. The anecdotes, in this case, purport to be the actual words and or actions of Muhammad. In some cases, this includes things which supposedly met with Muhammad's silent approval. So, and I know how this is going to sound. I know it sounds derogatory, but in some cases, it's akin to Muhammad's in a sound sleep and he's snoring. He says, Muhammad, can I go over here and have sex with this girl? Muhammad didn't say anything, so yes, I can. It's that type of, because he didn't say anything, it's assumed that it's legal. All sorts of problems with that just from a logical perspective, but okay. So in this sense, the Hadith is very similar to the Jewish Mishnah, a written record of Jewish oral Torah. Now the Sunnah is a collection of traditions and practices of Muhammad. Now, right here, I need to explain this a little bit. The Hadith is all records of what Muhammad supposedly said and did. The Sunnah is a collection of Hadith, it's a smaller subset that is assumed to be more accurate, more reliable, more faithful. So in other words, it's not going to deny the greater Hadith, but it's saying this is a collection of Hadith from the big collection. This is a smaller collection that we have a lot more reliance on. It's a lot more credibility. So it's asserted as, quote unquote, the good traditions and practice of Muhammad. So the good Hadith, witnessed and passed down by the first Muslims. So it says. Those Muslims who lived with Muhammad. So it says. The problem is a lot of them were dead before this was ever done. Essentially, the Sunnah is the authentic Hadith, or that's one way of looking at it. The Sunnah provides a model for the ideal Muslim life, an example of how the perfect Muslim should live. Essentially, it's the moral law of Islam, because you're living the way Muhammad did. That's the perfect Muhammad life, even though Muhammad said he's a sinner. So you're supposed to live a sinful life as a perfect life. And yes, that's literally what it's teaching. Yes, Muhammad says, I'm a sinner. I'm not perfect. I sin. Nothing in me is reliable. Follow me. Okay. And he never tells you when he sins. There's nothing in the Quran or the Hadith telling you when Muhammad has sinned. So you don't know when the things in the Hadith are actually Muhammad sinning and when they're not. And it's okay because Muhammad did it, so you can do it. And yes, I know how it sounds. This is also true. The Sunnah provides the model for the ideal Muslim. Okay, the Sunnah is derived from the Hadith, once again, parallels the Jewish Talmud. The Talmud is derived from the Mishnah. The importance of the Hadith within Islam. The Hadith is a central body of text in Islam. It is second only to the Quran, or actually the Sunnah, the good Hadith. Second only to the Quran in authority. Most people in the West don't know anything about it. It is also the necessary part of Islam for the Islamic religion. The Quran does not provide enough information to create a working religion. Too much information was left out. Consequently, the Hadith is necessary to fill in the structure missing from the Quran. It's from the Quran and the Hadith together that Sharia law is derived. The Hadith provides Muslims with a deeper understanding of the Quran, so it says. It clarifies and explains the teachings of the Quran. It fills in for Allah. It gives you guidance for religious practices, such as when and how to pray, guidance for social etiquette, how to treat each other at different levels of society. It gives you quote unquote moral guidance without ever defining what is moral. Guidance for the preservation of Muhammad's legacy. See, that's important. The Sunnah provides Muslims with guidance on controversial issues such as temporary marriages. And yes, that's a thing in Islam. The Sunnis and Shias differ over that, but it's still, Muhammad gave his people permission to do this. Clarity on the ruling of Islam, such as the prohibition on marrying 2 or more sisters. Now, the history of the Hadith, the good Hadith, it's complicated and disputed. I'm going to give you just a general overview. It wasn't compiled into the 10th and 11th century. So 300 to 400 years after Muhammad's dead. That's enough time for a lot of these sayings and traditions to they could very well be legend, meaning that they're mythology, they're stories now. The Hadith was imposed on Islam over time. Islam didn't have it there was no such thing as the Hadith at first. This process started in the 14th century. So they didn't start forcing it onto Muslims until 700 years after Muhammad created Islam. It's primarily achieved through socio-political and spiritual authorities from the 14th century onward by the imams and the caliphs, the leaders of Islam. This situation continues today, and for the same reasons. It's socio-political. The sectarian contention over the Hadith. There's a great deal of contention within Islam over which Hadith are valid, which ones should be Sunnah, which ones shouldn't. The primary divide is found in the Sunni-Shia split. There's a complicated process by which individual Hadith are authenticated. Take from the Hadith and move them into the Sunnah, from just the Hadith to the good Hadith. Consists roughly of 5 steps. They would evaluate the reliability of each person in the chain. Then they'd look for textual analysis, which often doesn't exist. Historic context, which could be part of a mythos at that point. Comparison with other Hadith, there are other copies of this hearsay story. And consensus of scholars. So in other words, the imams are deciding what is and isn't Islam. So after it's authenticated, quote unquote, a Hadith is recorded by the name of the last person in the chain of transmission. That right there tells you it's hearsay by definition. So if this guy knew Muhammad and he told it to this guy, 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 400, 500 years later, that last guy who they're using it from, you use his name. Okay. Meaning the person closest to the original source, the message or report of the actual words, and you record what was said and whether the words were those of Muhammad or one of his companions. So you got to say, is it a quote of Muhammad's or one of his companions? There's a great deal of contention as to which Hadith are valid and which are not. A lot of argument over that. It's not settled, which means that without a settled Hadith, you can't really tell whether or not you're living Islam the way Muhammad lived Islam, which in a secular way of looking at this means it's all mythology. This is the definition of a cult, folks. We're dealing with a cult of Muhammad's quote unquote mythos. So you don't have this problem in Christianity. This does not exist in Christianity. So again, Sunni-Shia rift, which often leads to different methods of translation as well. There are different collections of the Hadith. That's in your references. Different compilations by different imams. You can think of them like editors. For the Sunni, the leading authorities will include Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. For the Shia, it's the collection of Hadith known as, quote unquote, the 4 books. And within these different collections, there are different types of hadith, largely differentiated by reliability based on highly scrutinized hadith, those considered most reliable. Then there's the reliable hadith that have minor flaws, known to have flaws. Then there's these weak hadith narrated by a large number of people in every generation, appeal to the masses. Hadith narrated by a large number of people, but not to the same extent as above. So there's a large number of people, and then there's just a kind of large number of people. The hadith reporting the words of Allah as narrated by Muhammad, and then fabricated or forged hadith. And yes, there are hadith that they recognize are fabricated and forged, and yet they're still in the compilations of the hadith. So I really, I dropped something I shouldn't have dropped. If y'all give me just a minute, we'll go back and we'll pick up the other PDF and we'll read through some of it as well, because it is interesting. It's going to add on to what we've been reading here. And we'll continue with that while time permits. So this is a good thing, because next week we're going to be reading through actual verses from the Qur'an and the Hadith. All right, before we start with this, I see what time it is now. We'll come back and we'll do this in the second half hour. We'll take the bottom of the hour break. 3 minutes. Come on back. I'm going to give you more information. You're going to see more specifics. What you're about to read comes from former Muslims. So you don't have to take Joe's word for it. And the references are already in your external reference on the heading on the blog page under Islam. So 3 minutes, please, Natasha, and we'll be back. All right, what we're about to read is compiled from several former Muslims. The sources are no longer online. The links have all been broken. I do have hard copies of it in the reference pages and everything of your student outline. So you can go find this later if you'd like to. This is one of the reasons I copy things I find on the internet, put them in files that I can retain. These have been purged. But as you'll note, the author left us with the receipts. These are all former Muslims arguing this, and this is an attempt to evangelize Muslims, to tell them, hey, look, you're following a false religion. So the Quran is at the heart of Islam. If its claims can be substantiated, then Islam is true, and all opposing religious claims, including Christianity and Judaism, are false. So this is going to be a logical attack. If I can prove that the Quran is true, then Christianity is false. The Quran claims to be without mistake. This is in Surah 18:1. And that there is a copy of the Quran preserved on a table in heaven. Surah 85:21-22. So that's in the Quran. The Quran also claims that the revelation of this book is from God, the exalted in power, full of wisdom. It is we who have revealed the book to thee in truth. Surah 39:1-2. Muhammad is equating himself with Allah. He does this a lot in the Quran. Sometimes you can't tell who gave what order. Was it Muhammad or Allah? Muslim commentators say that the Quran is the final revelation from God. See for more details Giesler's book, Answering Islam, pages 179-80. The problem with this is what we just covered. We know that there are many different versions of the Quran and that they contradict themselves. So which Quran is the final revelation from God? And given that, Muslims admit that the Quran's been corrupted. So how do you know that that's the final revelation from Allah? Okay. Muhammad also makes the claim that, can they not consider the Quran? Were it from any other God, they would surely have found in it many contradictions. Surah 4:84. That's not abrogated. So what he's saying is there are no contradictions in the Quran. If you find them, the Quran's a lie. That's the logical extension. And the author says, so according to the Quran, if there is contradiction in this book, then it is not the word of God. Muhammad just helped us dig the grave for the Quran because the Quran is loaded with mistakes and contradictions. He'll bring the receipts. These authors will bring the receipts in a few minutes. The Quran consists of 114 books or chapters called surahs. The Quran can be viewed as two books intertwined. The early Mecca era would be the first book, and the latter Medina era the second. The earlier Mecca chapters deal more with faith and religion, whereas the latter Medina chapters deal more with politics and war. And yes, this is why I tell you Islam is not a religion. The surahs are not arranged by chronological order. They are arranged by length. The longest and typically the latest surah are toward the front of the Quran, while the shortest and usually earliest surahs are found in the back. The primary exception to this format is the first surah, which is basically a Muslim prayer and amounts to a Muslim profession of faith. The surahs are arranged by verse, but there is no standardized number for these verses. Consequently, the numbered verses can and do vary slightly from Quran to Quran and translation to translation. The language in the Quran. The Quran is only considered to be the true word of Allah when written in Arabic. When read in Arabic, the Quran is said to be such a beautiful and profound poetry as to entrance the reader or listener. Folks, if you go into a trance, you're dealing with a cult, okay? And possibly the occult. This poetry is held out as one of the signs that the Quran is the inspired, revealed word of Allah, because it is so beautiful for man to have written, too beautiful for man to have written. Translations are considered to be just that, translations. They are not held to be the true word of Allah. The original writings that made up the Quran were written in ancient Arabic in times before the vowels were added to the text. This creates some trouble in reading the text, even when it is in Arabic, as in many cases, the written text can hold many possible meanings. If the context of the passage would allow for more than one meaning, then the reader is left to decide for himself as to what Allah meant to say. Here are two examples from a literal translation of the Quran compiled by a devout Muslim and his daughter. Their version of the Quran is in that page I put on the blog page that says the Quran. Their work is in that. I put it up there for you. It's a legitimate Quran's translation by a faithful Muslim and his daughter. I don't need to lie And I don't need to make up provocations or to make my case. I don't have to do anything but use Islam's own material. Surah 2, verse 36. So the devil made them slip, fall, or sin. You have to decide from it. So he brought them out of what they were in it. And we said, descend or decline, some of you to some an enemy, and for you in the earth or the planet earth is settlement and long life or enjoyment to a time. That's a literal translation. If that makes sense to you, you're doing better than me. Surah 3, verse 112. The humiliation, disgrace, you decide, is forced only on them, or only on them, wherever they were defeated or overtaken, except with a covenant or agreement from God and a covenant agreement from the people, and they returned or resided with anger from God, and the poverty or oppression was forced on them, that is, with what they were disbelieving, with God's signs, verses, or evidence, and they killed the prophets without right, that is, because of what they disobeyed, and they were transgressing. Again, in English, this does not, it's a literal, this is like Young's word for word literal translation of the Bible. But in this case, you have to decide what the word means. Context doesn't give it to you. And that's part of the problem. So when this Muslim and his daughter translated the Quran into English, they did it this way. Non-Muslim scholars have often remarked on what is often poor and even incorrect grammatical structure in the Quran. Many times, as evidenced in the two verses cited above, necessary words are missing entirely in the verse in the Quran. Some have suggested that, at least in part, this is caused by the attempt to make poetry from the revelation. But the Quran doesn't say that one sometimes has to, but the Quran does say that sometimes one has to fill in for Allah, meaning correct Allah's grammar for him. So Allah doesn't know how to speak Arabic. The literary style in the Quran, as previously noted, the Quran was revealed in the form of poetry that is often forced and awkward to read. By the way, in Muhammad's day, a poet was thought to be possessed. So by the very fact that he's reciting poetry, Muhammad is, in his day and age, in his culture, he's confessing to be possessed, not by an angel, by a demon, which is one of the reasons he wanted to throw himself off of a cliff. So it's written as one half of a conversation where it is assumed that the reader is already aware of the events that have happened previously. So you have to know his biography. As a result, the Quran often reads as disjointed or rambling and incoherent, which is what we just saw. In large part, this is why the Sirah and Hadith are necessary, to fill in the blanks and the missing information necessary to make a coherent religion out of the text of the Quran. The history of the Quran. Originally, the Quran was disseminated orally. Remember, the Quran says that Muhammad was illiterate. What was written down was written on whatever was available at the time. Muhammad dictated his vision or revelation. This ranged from paper and parchment to rocks, sticks, palm fronds, and even animal bones. Oftentimes, reciters were called to memorize the revelation as closely as possible, but not necessarily word for word. During the Battle of Yamama, some 450 of these earliest reciters who kept the Quran were killed. There was no definitive Quran at the time of Muhammad's death. It was 20 years or more before, after Muhammad died, before anyone started to collect verses of the Quran. It took some 150 years after his death before they were compiled and the first Quran was written. It is known that some of the original verses of the Quran were lost. Muhammad's child wife said this after Muhammad died. This is Aisha. The verse of the stoning and of suckling an adult 10 times were revealed, and they were written on a paper and kept under my bed. When the messenger of Allah expired and we were preoccupied with his death, a goat entered and ate away the paper. References: Musnad Ahmad bin Hanbal. This is a hadith, so that's the last name of the guy who did this. Volume 6, pages 269. Sunnah ibn Mahya, page 626, and it tells you where you find all of these different references to that. From the hadith, we know that other surahs have been lost. So from reading the collection of sayings and whatever, we also know. So here he says, we used to recite a surah which resembled in length and severity to Surah Bara'at. I have, however, forgotten it, with the exception of this, which I remember out of it. Quote, if there were two valleys full of riches for the son of Adam, he would long for a third valley, and nothing would fill the stomach of the son of Adam but dust. Sahih Muslim. That's the Imam who compiled that collection of Hadith, volume 2, page 501. So in other words, we don't know what the rest of that. It was long. It was severe. We don't know what the rest of it was. It got lost. This is supposed to be part of the Qur'an, not the Hadith. That was supposed to have been part of the Qur'an. And then it says, we used to recite a surah similar to the one of Mushababiyahat, or whatever his name is, and I no longer remember it. But this much I have indeed preserved. O you who truly believe, why do you breach that which you do not practice? And that is inscribed on your neck as a witness, and you will be examined about it on the day of resurrection. Okay, that's another one that should have been in the Quran that's missing. So the Quran you have today, per Islam's second holiest group of books, the Hadith, admits that at least major parts of it are gone. So how do you know? If I just randomly went through the Bible and removed passages, I removed 4 passages here and 5 passages there, I remove a chapter there, how do you know what the Bible actually says? How would you know what to do with it? You don't. You couldn't. Islam admits that the Quran has been, a lot of it's been lost. Well, then what type of God cannot preserve his own word? And according to Islam, this has happened over and over and over and over again. Keeps getting corrupted. So, in fact, it is reported from Ismail ibn Ibrahim. This is one of the imams who compiled Hadith. From Nafi, from Ibn Umar, who said, let none of you say I have acquired the whole of the Quran. How does he know what all of it is when much of the Quran has disappeared? Rather, let him say, I have acquired what has survived. So that is an admission that nobody has the Quran anymore. I guess you're going to say, well, the only parts that survived are the parts Allah wanted. How convenient. Am I being sarcastic? Yes. Because if Allah gave parts of the Quran to somebody he didn't want them to be preserved, why didn't he just abrogate them? Say, okay, well, that's there for you to learn from, but now it doesn't matter anymore. There are other parts of the Quran that are preserved that have been abrogated. I'm sorry, but from a logical perspective, this is not the work of a God. Of a demon, maybe, but not a God. So it is also admitted by Muslim clerics that the Quran has been edited throughout the years. The episode of the Satanic Verses is just one example. Not edited like in the Bible, where I update a name or I fill in a descriptor of what the ancient Hebrew term might have meant or the cultural context. Not an explanation, not an addition, but a removal. It says in the Quran, Surah 53:19 says, have you considered Al-Lat and Al-Uzza and Manat, the third other, the third God? This passage was originally followed by the words, verily they are exalted maidens and their intercession is to be hoped for. Allah's 3 daughters. Well, that got removed. The earliest authority on the life of Muhammad, Ibn Hisham, claimed that these words were uttered by Muhammad at the instigation of Satan and are considered to be the Satanic Verses, not to be confused with Salman Rushdie's book. Okay, so they got removed because somehow or another, the true prophet Muhammad was under the inspiration of the devil. A true prophet is never under the inspiration of the devil, but always under the inspiration of the true God. At least that's how the Bible says it. And Muhammad said, read the Bible for truth and light. And he never abrogated that. So that's the guidance we have. So Muhammad has already said he's not a true prophet. He's also of Ishmael. And he says in the Quran and the Hadith that all true prophets come from Isaac. So he's already said twice now that he's not a prophet. He can't prophesy, so he's not a prophet. Islam's first scribe, who later became a Christian and was murdered for that, he discovered that while writing down the revelations Muhammad gave him, he could suggest changes to the revelation to which Muhammad often agreed. So in other words, if this is the word of Allah, your God, why does Muhammad allow a man to change the word? So deciding that this meant Muhammad's visions could not possibly be divine if a mere scribe could change them, he left Islam and was later assassinated by Muhammad for apostasy. Finally, Muhammad himself seemed to think that there were at least 7 official versions of the Quran. Yeah, Muhammad. I can't pronounce these names, but Ubay entered the mosque and, hearing a man recite, asked him who had instructed him. The man replied that he had been taught by the Prophet. Ubay went in search of the Prophet. When the man recited, Muhammad said, "That is correct." Ubay protested, "But you taught me to recite so-and-so." The Prophet said that Ubay was right too. Right? Burst out Ubay in the perplexity. The Prophet struck him on the chest and prayed, "O God, cause doubt to depart." Ubay broke into a sweat as his heart filled with terror. Muhammad disclosed that the 2 angels that had come to him, one said, "Recite the Quran in one form." The other advised Muhammad to ask for more than this. That was repeated several times until finally the first angel said, "Very well, recite it in 7 forms." The Prophet said, "Each of the forms is grace-giving, protecting, so long as you don't terminate a punishment verse with an expression of mercy, or vice versa, as you might, for example, say, 'Let's go' or 'Let's be off.'" 7 Qurans, even though there's only one in heaven. A rational explanation for this would be Muhammad couldn't remember what he said. So he says there are 7 of them, so he can always claim that whatever his mistake was when he gets caught came from one of the other translations, and you were the one that was at fault. Now, you can argue that away if you're a Muslim, but that's how I would read that. It also means that there's a contradiction right there. The oldest copies of the Quran. The oldest known copy of the Quran, single copy, dates from 790 AD, roughly 100 and something years after Muhammad dies. It's in the British Library. Muslims claim the Quran in the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul, in Turkey. They claim that's the oldest surviving Quran and dates from 650 AD, when Muhammad was alive. However, this Quran is written in Kufic script. There is no known use of this script before 750 to 800 AD. So we have nothing to validate that claim. None of the earliest versions of the Quran agree with each other. They all contain significant differences that cannot simply be attributed to translational problems. There's also a copy of the Quran in Russia that has the same issues. Now, here's part of what I want us to see. The Quran affirms and confirms the Bible, the gospel of Jesus in the Old Testament, the Torah, guidance and light. Surah 287. And most certainly we have Moses the book, the Bible, and we sent apostles after him, one after another. So Allah and Muhammad sent. Muhammad is claiming to be there when Allah sent people to Moses. He's writing as though he is a parallel to Messiah, to Yeshua, Jesus. And it says, we gave Isa, Jesus, the son of Mary, clear arguments and strengthened him with the Holy Spirit. So Muhammad gave Jesus the Holy Spirit. That's what's being said. But the point of this is the Bible's true. And the gospel is true. Surah 348, and he, Isa, which is Jesus, will teach him the book and wisdom and the Tavrat, the Torah, and the Injil, the Christian gospel. Not altered the way they are in your Bible now. So this is the early stages when he was still trying to be accepted by Christianity and Judaism, wanted to sound like them. Surah 350, and a verifier of that which is before me of the Torah, and that I may allow you part of which has been forbidden to you. I have come to you with a sign from your Lord, therefore be careful of your duty to Allah and obey me. So now he's trying to take control of Christians and Jews. Surah 544. Surely we reveal the Torah. So he and Allah, Muhammad and Allah revealed the Torah, the Bible, the Old Testament, in which was guidance and light. With it, the prophets who submitted themselves. Now that's blasphemy right there. But he is telling you that the Bible is goodness and light. It's Surah 540. Note this is all in the Quran. Surah 546. And when we, him and Allah, sent after them in their footsteps Isa, Jesus, son of Miriam, Mary, verifying what was before him of the Torah, the Jewish Torah, and we gave him the Injil, the Christian gospel, in which was guidance and light. So now there's guidance and light in the gospel as well. And verifying what was before it of the Torah and a guidance of the admonition of those who guard against evil. So the Old and New Testament are both true. Surah 568, say, O followers of the book, that's the Bible, you follow no good till you keep up the Torah and the Injil, the Old Testament and the New Testament. Folks, he's got that more accurate than most Christians do. And that which is revealed to you from your Lord. Now he's calling that your God. And now what he's telling you is leave your God and come to my God, because my God is the one who gave you your God. He's trying to make Yahweh lesser than Allah, which is what Allah Akbar means. It means Allah is greater than Yahweh. It's trying to say that Allah is El Elyon. He's not. Surah 6, 154. Again, we gave the book, the Torah, to Moses, to complete our blessings on him who would do good to others and to make plain all things in a guidance and mercy so that they should believe in the meeting of their Lord. He's admitting to another God. Surah 6, 155, still in the Quran, folks. And this Torah is a book we have revealed, blessed. Therefore, follow it and guard against evil that mercy may be shown to you. Muslims are told to follow the Bible. Surah 29:46, and dispute ye not with the people of the book, but say, we believe in the revelation which has come down to us, and in that we came down to you. Our Allah and your Allah is one. Our God and your God is one. No, they're not. No, they're not. Surah 32:23, and certainly we gave the book to Moses, so be not in doubt concerning the receiving of it, and we made it a guide for the children of Israel. So Allah is the God of Israel, so he claims. So why do they hate the Jews? Why do they hate Christians? Surah 43:63. When Jesus came with clear signs, he said, now have I come to you with wisdom, and in order to make clear to you some of the points of which ye dispute, therefore fear Allah and obey me. So you're also supposed to obey Jesus. Surah 46:12, we are told, and before it, the book of Moses, Torah, was a guide and mercy, and this is a book verifying it in the Arabic language, that it may warn those who are unjust and has good news for the doer of good. So the Quran verifies the Bible. Muslims are commanded to accept the Bible and not to judge between the prophets and the words of God. They are not permitted to believe in one and not the other, or in parts. If they do, they are infidels. Surahs 4, 152, 289, 42, 13 through 15, and 29, 46 through 47. Muhammad himself referred to the Torah, the Old Testament, for authority. Asked to produce the Torah and read from it, Al-Imnar, this is 393, a group of Jews went to Muhammad and asked him to pronounce judgment on an adulterous couple. Muhammad asked for the Torah to be brought before him, and the couple was subsequently stoned in accordance with the penalty laid down in the Torah. This is in the Hadith. It's Imam Bukhari, book 38, number 4,434. That's 4,434 Hadith. More pages than just that. This leads to contradictions between the Bible and the Quran. Let's finish this section for the day. Surah 29:46. Muslims are told by Allah not to question the authority of the scriptures of the Christians, saying, and dispute ye not with the people of the book, but say, we believe in your revelation, which has come down to us, and in that which came down to you. Our Allah and your Allah is one. So they should be worshiping Yahweh. Romans, question on the board from Deltaros. I thought he couldn't read. He couldn't. He winged it. Romans 10, 9 through 10. That if thou shalt confess with thy mouth that Lord Yeshua, Lord Jesus, and shalt believe in thine heart that God hath raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. For with the heart man believeth unto righteousness, and with the mouth confesses is made unto salvation. So, Surah 29:46, you believe everything Jesus said. Romans 10, 9 through 10, you got to believe he was crucified and that God will raise him from the dead. Surah 5, 73 through 75, they do blasphemy who say Allah is one of three. So in other words, Yeshua can't possibly have been divine. That's blasphemy, even though there's a Trinity in your Quran. However, when these types of contradictions are pointed out to Muslim clerics today, they reply with the claim that Torah and gospel are both corrupted, changed by evil men who follow the prophets who revealed the original Quran to them, as Gabriel did to Muhammad. Problem with that is, we know that the oldest known Qurans don't agree, but the Dead Sea Scrolls tell us that the Bible we have today still agrees with a Bible that existed, 200-something years before Messiah, before Christ, which is 850 years before Muhammad. No, I'm going with the oldest known copies of the Bible over the oldest known copies of the Quran. So logic doesn't help the imams here. This means that everything in the Quran rests upon the validity of the Bible as we have it today. It can be shown that the Bible of today is substantially the same as the original, then the Quran commands Muslims to obey it, not the Quran. It would also mean that the Quran could not be an inspired text or the revealed word of the omnipotent, perfect God. So next week, we'll probably pick up right here, a brief commentary on the reliability of the modern biblical texts. We'll go through these sections here. We'll look at some of the contradictions that are right there in the Quran, and it tells you the sections. And then we'll go through some of this. This is all right here, citations from the Quran. And later, we'll go through some of the Hadith. We'll look at the differences between the Quranic Jesus and the biblical Jesus and Muhammad. And we'll continue picking up on this stuff. This is important, folks. Even if you don't believe the Bible, let's say you're not a Christian, the Western world needs to know this stuff. Because if it doesn't, then you're likely to believe the lies of Islam. And they are lies. Don't get me wrong here. These are lies. Islam knows it. Anybody who's got intellectual integrity could easily examine this and say, well, that doesn't work. But they don't. Why? They've been deceived. So if you are a Christian believer, you should have a little bit of grace. I won't necessarily say sympathy here, but you should have a little bit of Yahweh's grace for these folks. They've been deceived, but they need the truth. And you need to know how to give them that truth. Now that takes a little bit of practice. I've gone online and I have found Christian apologists debating Muslim apologists. That never goes well. The Muslim ends up ranting and raving and screaming and acting like a maniac. When they do that, that's because the devil within has been brought face to face with the living truth of the gospel and the Messiah in what's being presented. And the only thing they know how to do is react with anger and hate and threats and violence. Just like when you corner a secular humanist, what we might call the leftists or progressives, they do the same thing. They seek to kill the messenger. Well, you have that in the Bible as well, where the Jews and sometimes the house of Israel killed the prophets. That tells you that even though you were of the bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you were of the your spiritual father was the devil. Your bloodline does not guarantee you are part of the kingdom of Yahweh. Your heart does, which is why a Gentile or a son of Abraham can both, or daughter of Abraham can both be part of the kingdom. It's not got anything to do with blood lineage. It has to do with spiritual alignment and allegiance. It's a heart issue. So you got to learn to look at things spiritually. And when you do, you're going to find that the Quran is, you fill it in. I have no kind words for it. So this is where we're going to stop for today. We'll pick up here next week. For those of you who think this is, if you think what we're doing is worthwhile, hit the like buttons, share the show, encourage others to go back and pick up and catch up with us. There are plenty of other voices out there trying to explain Islam. If one of those suits you better, go for it. The only thing I'm going to do for you to suggest you might want to stay here is, even in my animosity toward Islam, I will acknowledge truth when and where I think I see it, even when it benefits Islam or is contradictory or, well, not contradictory, but not complementary to Christianity. I will call strikes and balls the best I can, and I will bring you the receipts. Not only will I tell you where to find them, I'll put it up on our blog page for you to go read. And in some cases, link you to outside sources for it. Like I did with the Wikipedia page, will take you straight to official Islamic Hadith. You can read right from Islam. I've put the Qur'an, several translations of the Qur'an on my website, Islamic Qur'an. I have got one thing up there. It says, why did Uthman destroy the Qur'ans? Why did he do that? It's from an Islamic site, and they're justifying it. They're being an apologist. They're giving a defense for why he did that. I'll use the other side's information. I don't have to lie to you. I don't have to prevaricate or make things seem worse than they are. I don't have to deceive you. I can just show you what it says and read it. So you decide, but by all means, please, please, please learn about Islam. Stay with this all the way to the end. Okay? Stay with this study, or at least go find somebody else. And for the most part, I've given you outside references. Go to former Muslims to teach you about Islam. If you're not going to stay here, do that. Be careful of the sensationalists selling books and video, looking for clicks and clickbait and everything. You might find a little truth in there, but you might also end up with a lot of lie, and you won't be equipped to know the difference. Just be careful. You're dealing with spiritual darkness here at a massive scale. I believe this is the fourth kingdom, the kingdom that is to come, that'll be unlike any other. Because this is a spiritual kingdom, and it's global in reach. Islam. And everything that Daniel is told to look for in that fourth kingdom fits Islam. I don't think it's Rome. I think it's Islam. But you're free to differ. But if I'm right, most people will never see this coming. So, like I said, if you like what we're doing, hit the like buttons, share the show. If you're new, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell. That way you'll see the new shows when we do it. And if you have questions, please always comment. Your shares, your likes, your comments, they help spread the show to other people. Tomorrow, Scepter and the Birthright, we're going to be back looking at Jeremiah's mission and what he's doing and why and what that means for us today. And Alan is going to be firmly in the scriptures with this, comparing scripture to world history, actual physical world history. It's going to be fascinating tomorrow. So until then, or until we see you again, thank you for joining us. We hope that we're making your world and your life and your understanding of this world better, strengthening your faith. We love you. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.